take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth. Hey!
Spanning the continent to bring you the truth about cannabis and marijuana law reform.
I smoke pot and I like it a lot.
The Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation. Now, here's your host, Radical Russ Belville.
Good day, tokers and tokettes and non-toking lovers of liberty. It is Monday, September 22nd, 2014, and it's got to be 420 somewhere in the world. Thank you. Welcome to the show. We have got a show just jam-packed with content for you today. If you've been following the marijuana news, you may have seen this story that is just blowing up. I've seen it on Time, TMZ, Washington Post. Everyone's talking about Charlo Greene. She is the reporter at KTVA Alaska who quit on the air saying, fuck it. She quit on the air to go into business in marijuana legalization. She also revealed herself as a marijuana clinic owner. So we have got that video of her going off air live. And I got to tell you, as someone who has also had an experience of quitting his on-air job through kind of a temper tantrum, I feel some kinship with this woman. So we will show you that video. Plus, she has released a new video explaining why she quit. That's coming up in our Behind the Headlines segment today. Then, in drug war data mining today, Scott M. Gagnon is one of these youth prevention coordinators in the state of Maine. He's working with the Project SAM people there, and we engage in Twitter debates from time to time. And this weekend, we had a Twitter debate about the children. Of course, what about the children? And their grades and how their grades suffer if they use marijuana. This dovetailed off of a report saying that kids that smoke pot were 60% less likely to get their high school diplomas. Of course, we know the real reasons for that, but Scott wants to make it seem as if pot is going to cost the kids their academic future. So we're going to do some drug war data mining and take a look at the actual statistics on drug use among high school kids and whether or not it affects their high school graduation rates. We will check that out, plus more in drug war data mining. Also on the show today, it's Monday, so at 1:30 we'll be speaking with Dr. Mitch Earlywine in our Cannabis Q&A segment. You can call in live at 971-533-7111 or get your questions in to our chat room. We also got a question by email that we'll be asking today as well. So check that out at 1:30 live with one of America's foremost cannabis researchers. And then at the end of the show, we'll have time for a radical rant. Today, I'm going off on Oregon NIMBYs. You know, NIMBY, that's not in my backyard. Yeah, we got some NIMBYs who have a big problem with their sensitive children's eyes being exposed to medical marijuana. Yet we'll show you what their kids are exposed to on a daily basis all around where that medical marijuana is proposed. We've also got the 420 radio news coming up right after the first break. We got some new polls out of Florida, some budget estimates for legal marijuana nationwide. Also, an endorsement for Measure 91 and free weed for veterans that took place this Saturday in Denver. Then we'll take it into hour two. We've got more with Charlo Greene, a report she had done on marijuana before she had quit in Alaska. An update on Vivian Wilson, the epileptic girl from New Jersey who moved to Colorado. Bacon Dan will call in with the Roots Monday Daily Toker Tune, and Maureen Dowd hooked up with Willie Nelson on the Honeysuckle Rose bus. We'll tell you how that went down. All of that coming up on the Russ Belville Show right here on 420radio.org every weekday, Monday through Friday. That would be weekdays at 3 p.m. Pacific Time, 6 p.m. Eastern. And if you miss any of the show, remember you can catch replays 3 hours from now. Also, our replays run at the same time in the AM, 3 and 6 a.m. Pacific Time. Or if you're a podcast person, you can always download us by podcast. Get the podcast info at 420radio.org or subscribe through Stitcher or iTunes. The news is next. I'm Radical Russ. We'll be right back.
You're tuned into the Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation.
420 Radio is 24-hour marijuana.
Mike Schwab is a former middle school science and math teacher. Currently, he works with children daily as an after-school program leader.
Currently, kids have easy access to marijuana with little understanding of its impact. We can take better care of our kids through Measure 91 with strict regulations and funding for proven marijuana education and prevention programs to keep kids from using it. Under our current marijuana laws, one mistake can ruin a life. Measure 91 removes unfairly harsh punishment for marijuana offenses and gets more tax money to local police and drug prevention. Vote yes on 91.
Free Weed from Danny Danko, replaying Wednesdays at 1 Pacific on 420radio.org. It was a nightmare scenario last May for one Southern Oregon woman. It's 4 a.m. and someone's trying to break in.
911 emergency. My ex-boyfriend is trying to break into my house. He put me in the hospital a few weeks ago, and I've been trying to keep him alive.
But because of budget cuts, the sheriff's office is only open during weekday business hours.
I don't have anybody to send out there. So if he comes inside the residence and assaults you, can you ask him to go away? Or
he did break into the home, and he did rape and choke this woman. Meanwhile, it was announced that the Oregon Sheriff's Association made a $100,000 donation to the campaign against Measure 91, the initiative to legalize marijuana. So there's enough money to protect people from marijuana, but not rapists? Measure 91 devotes 35% of tax revenues from marijuana sales to state and local police. Vote yes on Measure 91. A message from the Russ Belville Show, not endorsed or sponsored by the Measure 91 campaign. It's time for the 420 Radio News, covering the latest headlines in consumer cannabis, medical marijuana, and industrial hemp. Transcripts of 420 Radio News are available daily on our website at 420radio.org. Now, here's Russ Belville with your marijuana headlines in 4 minutes and 20 seconds. This is your 420 Radio News for Monday, September 22nd, 2014. The nationwide legalization of marijuana would rake in more than $3 billion in state and local tax revenue every year, a new study has found. While the study estimates Colorado will rake in $78 million in sales and excise taxes by June 2015, California comes out on top and would tally more than $519 million, roughly the equivalent of the state's entire parks and recreation budget, consumer group NerdWallet announced on Monday. Texas, Florida, Michigan, and New York also stand to get the most revenue, while rural Midwestern states would earn the least. The study did not take into account reduced spending on law enforcement by not having to enforce certain laws, medical marijuana sales, and fluctuations or potential long-term market shifts. A recently commissioned poll for United for Care shows strong and stable support for Florida Amendment 2, a measure that would allow for the medical use of marijuana in the state. According to the survey conducted on behalf of United for Care, the main organization advocating for passage of the amendment, 69% of likely voters in Florida support this measure, with only 28% opposed. 60% approval is needed to pass a constitutional amendment in the state of Florida. United for Care has conducted 4 internal polls since January 2013, employing 3 different pollsters. The first survey by Hamilton Campaign showed 70% support in January 2013. The second, carried out in March of 2013 by the Kitchens Group, revealed 71% intended to vote yes, and a June 2014 poll by Anzalone List Research and Public Opinion Strategies reported 70% voter support for the amendment. Washington, D.C. voters appear to be ready to legalize marijuana, according to a new poll that puts support at 65%. On November 4th, D.C. voters will decide Initiative 71, which would legalize adult marijuana use, possession of up to 2 ounces, and home cultivation of up to 6 marijuana plants for personal use. The sale of marijuana, however, would remain illegal. The D.C. Council is considering separate bills that would allow the regulation and taxation of marijuana. According to the Washington Lawyers Committee, arrest statistics from 2009 to 2011 revealed that 9 out of 10 people arrested for drugs in Washington were black, though blacks make up just slightly more than half of the city's population. Yet government surveys show that blacks are no more likely than whites to use the drug. Earlier this year, the D.C. Council decriminalized the possession of an ounce or less of marijuana. The district legalized marijuana for medical use in 2010. Oregon's former U.S. Attorney Chris Olson has endorsed Measure 91, which would regulate, legalize, and tax marijuana for adults 21 and older. Olson has worked in justice and law enforcement for more than 40 years. She said, quote, "I enforced our marijuana laws and they don't work. Filling our courts and jails has failed to reduce marijuana use and drug cartels are pocketing all the profits." End quote. Olson joins several other high-profile supporters of Measure 91, including former Oregon Supreme Court Justice Bill Riggs and former Addictions and Mental Health Services of Oregon Director Richard Harris. She continued, quote, with the limited resources law enforcement has, police need to be focused on things that are a real threat to our community, not marijuana, Olson said. We want them to be spending their time on real problems, dangerous, addictive drugs like meth and heroin, and most of all, violent crime, end quote. Hundreds of military veterans received marijuana free of charge in Denver on Saturday. The unusual event included free medical marijuana and edibles. A handful of Denver businesses teamed up for the largest event ever hosted by Operation Grow for Vets. Saturday's Denver cannabis giveaway also handed out 400 bags of marijuana-infused products to military veterans in need. Said Mark Pitt, a Vietnam-era veteran, quote, "I'm allergic to morphine opiates. I can't take them. So I don't have much choice other than to do that," end quote. But Bob Doyle, with the Colorado Smart Approaches to Marijuana, or Project SAM, questioned the safety of giving out the green to the veteran population. Doyle said, quote, "These people are getting marijuana with varying degrees of potency and THC. That could cause things like paranoia, obviously things we wouldn't want someone with PTSD to be experiencing," end quote. This has been your 420 Radio News for Monday, September 22nd, 2014. I'm Russ Belville. 420 Radio, the activist radio station.
Despite strong public support for medical cannabis, decriminalization, and legalization in Georgia, the state spends $121 million every year to arrest, prosecute, and imprison Georgians for simple possession. Each year, the state of Georgia spends less on driver services, agriculture, and forestry combined. What else can $121 million a year do in Georgia? With that much money, the state could hire and keep 3,000 more teachers, improve roads and bridges, provide tax relief for small businesses, repair aging sewage systems, or lower taxes. But right now, that's millions of dollars of your tax money wasted on failed enforcement. Tell your representative you're tired of wasteful spending and ask them to end cannabis prohibition. Join the conversation at www.peachtreenormal.org. Peachtree Normal is a proud affiliate of NORML, the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws.
NORML stands for Responsible Adult Cannabis Use. If cannabis use is causing problems in your life, consider taking a break or seeking medical assistance. Consider ceasing cannabis use if you have a family history of mental illness. Don't drive or operate heavy machinery while impaired by cannabis use. Cannabis use is not without risks, even though the risks are far less than those posed by legal drugs. The Marijuana Business Association, or MJBA, are proud sponsors of the Russ Belville Show. It is the mission of the MJBA to establish integrity and legitimacy, create common market standards, provide market intelligence, and develop best ethical business practices for participants in the emerging legal marijuana industry, including commercial hemp, medical marijuana, and recreational marijuana for adults. Learn more about the Marijuana Business Association and visit mjba.net to join today. That's mjba.net. Welcome back, everybody. 14 after the hour, and time for us to go behind the headlines. And the big headline out today is the story of Charlo Greene. She's a reporter, or was a reporter, for KTVA, and she recently quit her job on air, and that's pretty much what everyone is talking about right now. We've got the video of that on-air announcement, and her revealing herself as a dispensary operator. She's basically trying to get Measure their Question 2 passed in Alaska so that the legal marijuana can be bought and sold. Let's take a look at that video.
Now, everything you heard is why I, the actual owner of the Alaska Cannabis Club, will be dedicating all of my energy toward fighting for freedom and fairness, which begins with legalizing marijuana here in Alaska. And as for this job, well, not that I have a choice, but fuck it, I quit. All right, we apologize for that. We'll be right back. Pardon for us. Meanwhile, the Vote Yes on 2 campaign held a fundraiser last night with Gary Johnson, the CEO.
Now, that's got to be my favorite part of the entire bit, is watching the anchor having to come back, being thrown back from "fuck it, I quit," and having to deal with that on air live. That was pretty funny. Also loved how she was leading in to talk about a story that involved Governor Gary Johnson, referring to him as a CEO of the big marijuana company that he's a part of. But he, of course, was also a 2-term governor. We could have mentioned that. Charlo Greene is getting a lot of attention. This story has made it to Time Magazine, TMZ. I just saw a piece on Vice News that got uploaded. They have an interview with her. We'll bring you some of that information in hour 2 as we go more into depth on this story. But question 2 is facing a lot of opposition from a group called Big Marijuana Big Mistake. It's another one of the Project Sam minions out there. And they're being funded by money that's being funneled through some Alaska tribal corporations. And a woman who's the spokesperson is supposedly a volunteer, but she is being still paid at her job, which is letting her take the time off to run the campaign and still paying her salary. So that may have also been why Charlo Greene felt the need to quit. Let's get it in Charlo's own words. This is her reasoning why she quit.
There comes a time in each and every one of our lives when we must choose to continue to spectate or stand up for what's right.
Now, everything you heard is why I, the actual owner of the Alaska Cannabis Club, will be dedicating all of my energy toward fighting for freedom and fairness, which begins with legalizing marijuana here in Alaska. And as for this job, well, not that I have a choice, but fuck it, I quit. All right, we apologize for that. We'll be right back.
To question what they said was wrong, why they were given authority, and where their claims of danger and peril come from. Why are Americans arrested every 37 seconds, Alaskans every 4.3 hours? Why should an aspiring someone lose their ability to earn a higher education to become that someone they were meant to be? And why should you lose the ability to get public assistance in times of struggle and need? Marijuana? They say it's a myth that anyone is jailed for simple possession. Regulating it will force it on our children. If you're allowed to smoke it in the privacy of your home, society as we know it is all but ruined. Don't even get me started on things like shatter and glass. Concentrates are just as bad as meth, heroin, and smack. If we allow responsible adults to smoke weed, what's next? Legalizing crack? But a simple Google search will show prohibitionists don't know how to use Google, or just don't care to fact check and choose to use fear-mongering to fool you. Last year in Alaska, there were 669 arrests, 2,697 in the past 3 years. Colorado itself says youth usage rates are falling. That's what the no-weed people don't want you to hear. Now shatter and glass and green crack and BHO are to dry herb what hard liquor is to beer. If responsible adults should be allowed to choose how they like to drink, why differentiate my toke from your beer? Who's listening? Who is willing to take a stand? I'm not afraid, clearly. But if you are, I don't judge you or any other man. Nearly a century of marijuana prohibition and stigma have stained America, the land of the free and home of the brave. But we have a chance to start taking back the right. Today it's marijuana prohibition, and once we get that done nationally, we the people will realize that we are stronger than ever, and you will feel empowered to take up what you choose to fight. Advocating for freedom and fairness should be everyone's duty. I'm making it my life work to uphold what America stands for truly. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, ideals that now need to be defended. But I can't do this alone. I need you, in the very least, to start the conversation. Talk to a friend, a mother, a coworker, brother, anyone. Just share your own My Marijuana story. Show them that we smokers are responsible, contributing members to society. Changing one heart and mind at a time is the only way to legalize marijuana and bask in Lady Liberty's glory. My reporting name is Charlo Greene. My real name is Charlene Egby. I'm the president and CEO of the Alaska Cannabis Club. I'm voting yes on ballot measure 2 in Alaska on November 4th because I am a true American. And voting yes on 2 is a vote for liberty, freedom, and fairness. Where do you stand?
Hide the dope!
We don't have any dope.
And what did I just smoke?
I got a new crush. Charlo Charlo Greene, whatever your name is, you are one hell of a spokesperson for the cause. Thank you for standing up for Alaskans and standing up for all Americans and being brave and doing it in a way that's got national attention. We'll have more on the Charlo Greene story in hour 2, but coming up next, drug war data mining.
420 Radio, the home of marijuana experts. Are you a hypocrite? If you live a closeted cannabis lifestyle, you are. Read about 7 people living a closeted cannabis lifestyle who are on the verge of coming out in The Hypocrites by Mara K. Eaton. Available at areyouahypocrite.net. You can purchase the book on Amazon and Barnes & Noble, also available on iTunes. Check out Mara K. Eaton on Facebook as well. Learn more at areyouahypocrite.net. 420radio.org is proud to replay the Hollywood Hemptress Hour with Terry Joyce from Portland, Oregon. Terry Joyce is a stand-up comedian and writer and was a former reality television star from the first season of Last Comic Standing. In 2007, she was caught up in a marijuana dispensary raid that made her a cannabis activist. Catch the replays Tuesday at 12 Pacific on 420radio.org. At Herbie's Cannabis Seeds, we pride ourselves on bringing you the best quality seeds from the world's most respected cannabis seed producers, all at the lowest online prices. You can find Herbie's Seeds at herbiesheadshop.com. All cannabis seeds are sold as souvenirs and as a means of preserving cannabis genetics. Herbie's Seeds in no way intends to condone, promote, or incite the use of illegal or controlled substances. We strongly urge all prospective customers to check their national laws prior to placing an order. Herbie's Seeds at herbiesheadshop.com. Proud sponsors of the Russ Belville Show and 420 Radio. Arguing for the end of adult marijuana prohibition is easy because we have facts, science, reason, compassion, evidence, truth, and logic on our side. It is even easier when researchers catalog it all for us. Learn how to gather the facts on marijuana use, arrests, seizures, rehabs, drug tests, and more in this edition of Drug War Data Mining.
All right, welcome back, everybody. It is 22 and a half after the hour, and today we're taking a look at the fears of Maine's Scott M. Gagnon. Now, Scott Gagnon works with drug and alcohol prevention out in the state of Maine, and I tend to go through some Twitter debates with him from time to time, and recently we got on the subject of kids, grades, and marijuana. And this was sponsored, or sparked, I should say, by some graphs that appeared in the Washington Post Wonk blog. This is one showing the rate of teenage marijuana use versus high school graduation rates. And it showed that the x-axis, the farther to the right you go, the more kids are smoking pot, and the farther up you go on the y-axis, the more kids are graduating high school. And sure enough, 2003 through 2006, as kids' pot smoking went down, graduation rates went down. But since 2006, graduation rates and pot use have both increased. And in another graph, the Wonk blog people showed that the state-by-state graph of kids using marijuana versus the high school graduation rate in that state showed no correlation. States like Vermont, where 12 or more % of the kids smoke pot, had really high graduation rate. States like Utah, that have very low use, had a low graduation rate, but there was no correlation between this. Well, Scott Gagnon had a problem with that because he said it wasn't fair to compare because the kids who don't smoke pot, you wouldn't see an effect on the graduation rates. You should only ask the kids who do smoke pot. And then he went on to say that as far as the kids in Maine that do smoke pot, more than half of them are getting D's and F's and so forth. And the only problem with that kind of thinking is it introduces into the scenario what are called confounders. Confounders are where there are other explanations for what's going on in a correlation other than what you're looking at. For example, if you're looking at high school graduation rates among kids that smoke pot, You may also be ignoring the fact that kids that smoke pot tend to come from more socioeconomically disadvantaged areas where they have worse schools and less parental involvement. So I decided I would take a look at the data for that, and we went to the Analyze Online feature of the National Survey on Drug Use and Health, which anyone can access, and I went to the National Survey's numbers for 2012 and to do some online analysis there. In that online analysis, I thought it would be interesting to see what was the monthly marijuana use rate, which is a variable called MRJ-MON, and we could compare that with the grades the kids were getting, grade average for the last grading period, which would be, A, B, C, D, or F. When we run that table, Scott does seem to have a point, and you'll see that the kids who did not use marijuana in the past month, only 4.3% of them have a grade of D or lower, whereas the kids who did use within the last month, 13.7 had a grade of D or lower. So he might be tempted to say it's 3 times more likely that a kid who smokes pot is going to get a D or lower. But as we look at other variables, we find that there are other reasons why these kids might not be getting any better grades. There's a variable here called parents help with homework. Parents help with homework, if we substitute that variable in there, we find that for the kids who did not smoke marijuana in the past month, 82% of their parents are helping them with their homework. But for the kids that used in the past month, only 62% are helping with their homework. Maybe that has something to do with why the pot kids are getting lower grades. We have another variable in here as far as parents limiting the amount of TV. Do parents limit the amount of TV that these kids can watch? If we plug those variables in, once again, we find a pretty strong correlation. The kids who did not use pot at all, only 42%, I should say 42% of the parents of kids that did not smoke pot in the last month, always or sometimes had their TV watching limited. But when we looked at the pot smoking kids, about 20% had their TV watching limited by their parents. It seems to me, as we look at the data, parental involvement has a whole lot more to do with whether or not these kids are getting good grades versus whether or not they had used pot in the past. So this is just another way that the drug war data mining can help us to make these arguments and to poke holes in the fear balloons that the prohibitionists put before us. But always, whenever they say, what about the kids, the fallback argument is, we're not legalizing marijuana for the kids. We're legalizing marijuana to keep it away from the kids. We got more data to explain that on another episode.
420 Radio, fighting prohibition since 2012.
You know Herb Thrasher from the Herb Thrasher Flower Hour. Now get ready for Herb Age Designs for the proud cannabis consumer. Herb Age Designs, lifestyle gear for the 420 friendly. Herb Age Designs, we've got Frisbee golf discs and durable hemp gear. Herb Age Designs, we've got shot glasses, drinking glasses, coffee mugs, and beer cozies. Check us out on Facebook and online at herbagedesigns.com. And follow Herb Age and Herb.
As part of your organization, Dan, you are essentially targeting 10 or so states for legalizing recreational marijuana: Rhode Island, Vermont, New Hampshire, Hawaii. What's your sense of why those states could be ripe for legalization?
Well, the states that you mentioned are most likely to do this legislatively. They don't have a ballot initiative process there like we do in Colorado and Washington, where ballot initiatives were recently passed, and like we do in Maine, California, Arizona, Nevada, and some other states where we expect in 2016 or maybe even sooner initiatives will pass to tax and regulate marijuana.
And Reed, is it a sense that this could end up being another sort of coastal middle America divide or red state, blue state divide?
Well, aside from a few states like Nevada and Arizona that you just mentioned, every other state in that list has one thing in common: they have Democratic legislatures. And in those states, one of the big stories that we're telling at GovBeat is the divide between red America and blue America. Yeah. Red America is restricting abortion and cutting taxes on everything, whereas blue America is legalizing gay marriage and legalizing marijuana. So here we see, again, that sort of patchwork nation, as you mentioned. It's the coastal version.
The law offices of Omar Figueroa would like to remind you to stand up for your rights. If you are detained or arrested, treat law enforcement with respect and stand up for your rights by repeating, "I respectfully invoke all of my legal and constitutional rights. I do not consent to any search and seizure. I want to remain silent, and I want to speak with my attorney." Please contact the law offices of Omar Figueroa at 415-489-0420 or 707-829-0215 or on the web at omarfigueroa.com.
It's time for the Russ Belville Show's Cannabis Q&A with Dr. Mitch Earlywine. Dr. Earlywine is a professor of psychology at the State University of New York at Albany and a leading author and researcher on cannabinoids and health, who pins the Ask Dr. Mitch column for High Times magazine. Get your questions ready in our live chat or call in to 971-533-7111 now.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Half past the hour, time for our weekly visit with Dr. Mitch Earlywine. How you doing, Dr. Mitch?
Having a great day. How about you?
Oh, pretty good. We're getting our last warm weekend. We had our last warm weekend of the year, and now we're just battening down the hatches for 8 months of rain.
I'm afraid I turned on the heat this weekend myself, so we're just going to have to do our best.
All right. Well, Dr. Mitch, of course, is a renowned researcher on marijuana and its culture, science, history, and health. If you've got any questions, please get them into our chat room, or you can dial live at 971-533-7111. We've also got an email question, but before we get to all that, we always like to give Dr. Mitch the first word to tell us what's the latest in cannabis science.
Well, so far it's been kind of weird, but there's some new estimates out for basically every single state on how much money they might be able to earn if they had a tax and regulate system. And right now, New York State is over $100 million on that estimate, and California actually seems to have the highest with closing in on $500 million. So I think it's a pretty informative and interesting set of estimates and based on some pretty reasonable assumptions. So obviously there's a lot of money out there that could be made if we could just end this prohibition.
Excellent news. We reported on that as well. And any reaction from the folks in Albany?
It's curious because my more suspicious folks think there's been a whole lot of work behind the scenes on this already, but I don't see anything on the forefront other than one proposal by a state representative who I've met with before, and she's a wonderful person, and I'm certainly hoping she can get that out of committee.
All right. Well, let's go to some of the stories that I've got saved up here from the past week. We talked to you last Monday, and the very next day, interesting study came up, which I'm sure the result will shock you. Marijuana smokers may use the drug to cope with negative emotions.
Wow, there's a stunner. Yes, I know. It's interesting because I think folks are trying to frame this as negatively as possible, and I do want to, emphasize that we should all have a full range of affect and feel our feelings and stuff like that. There's a subset of folks who have a problem regulating their own emotions, and that emotion dysregulation, especially early in life and adolescence and stuff, seems to predict problematic use. And I of course, don't care about anybody's use. But when you start running into problems with it, that seems to be the issue. And I would just encourage folks to let themselves have a full range of feelings regardless of the plant. And if you feel bad, by all means, just let it run its course. And you'll be surprised how emotions come and go. Basically, moods are like the weather. They'll change sooner or later.
Yeah, that the report to me got me thinking of what I always say about teen marijuana use, and it's not so much that the marijuana use itself is so harmful, it's that you may be distracting yourself from dealing with a positive or negative emotion in your life that as a teenager, this is your first run. This is where you build, your perceptions and you build your habits on how to deal with situations in your life. And God knows you got enough, hormones running around in your brain from puberty as it is. You really don't need to be adding anything to that is going to mess you up for, trying to feel these experiences for the first time. I think that's what's so important.
It's funny because that avoidance coping style need not be from marijuana. I see folks do it with television or with alcohol or with all kinds of other activities. And the truth is, I think if we would quit catastrophizing about sadness and just feel it, we'd do a whole lot better.
Or video games and handheld devices, I would think too, would be something for this generation.
True.
All right, so escapism, like anything, moderation in all things, I suppose. All right, let's get to this other study, and this was the one, not so much the study that blew my mind, but the way that the mainstream media reported it and framed it. Mashable came up with this poll that supposedly said, and this is their headline, nearly 10% of Americans go to work high on weed. Did you get to see that study?
And boy, it made it sound like they were going to work high on weed every single day.
Yeah.
Right?
That's the problem I had with it.
First of all, not exactly the most random sampling technique. And then if you said you'd ever gone to work high at all, even one time, that was counted as a yes. So I'm afraid the coverage tended to make it sound like everybody was high at work all the time, or 10% of the people were high at work every single minute. And that was not what the data were really saying.
Yeah, and the other thing that I found that was interesting in that study is they asked people their prescription medication habits, and they had reported, some 13% or so that had reported, or I'm sorry, it's 28% that had reported they'd gone to work under the effects of a prescription medication, 13 to 15% who'd say they'd do it again or they'd do it at work. Now, I suppose that's not all mind-altering prescription medications, but still, doesn't that say something about how people tend to think of pills are okay, but God forbid anyone came in after they smoked a joint last weekend?
Oh, no, that's medicine. That doesn't count.
I guess you're right.
I mean, what are you supposed to say? If you're coming in all on Vicodin or even a couple of Benadryl, you're going to be a disaster. So I think the thing that should really matter is, are you doing a good job at work or not? Not what is essentially in your system.
Yeah. All right. And also a follow-up to that report. The website Mashable is the one that came up with this, and they had a report a month prior that pointed out that over 50% of Americans had gone to work under a hangover, which, alcohol overdose.
Well, and what's funny is we've got evidence for especially more sensitive works being basically impaired with hangover more than with actual measures of intoxication based on cannabis. So those old just savage fly the airplane simulator data that everybody always makes a big deal out of, actually only had 12 people. But when those guys were hungover, they did worse than when they were actually smoking marijuana. So that's a rough thought.
All right, we've got a question here for Dr. Mitch from our listeners sent to me by email, and it goes this way. I gave up smoking cannabis in favor of my own alcohol tinctures about 6 years ago because smoking bothered my throat and lungs. Vaporizing was better, but not good enough. He uses a decarboxylated cannabis mixture with Everclear alcohol. And then his question is this: is there any data to indicate the long-term use of an alcohol tincture like that could harm the throat, either from the alcohol or from the cannabis liquid itself?
Well, so it's extremely unlikely that a cannabis would. If you wanted to switch to a food-based glycerin, that would sidestep some of the issues with alcohol. But odds are high if you're making it concentrated enough. You're drinking maybe a teaspoon, I mean, it's really not a lot of exposure to the alcohol, so it seems really unlikely that it would be an issue.
Okay. Yeah, and reading the recipe here, an ounce of decarboxylated cannabis into 8 ounces of Everclear, mixture in a water bath for an hour, reduce the liquid to 4 ounces, and then 1 dropper in a shot glass topped off with water to dilute it. So yeah, it sounds very, very dilute to me. I don't think this would be something to worry about too much.
Exactly. I mean, if it's literally a dropper of alcohol, that's not going to get to anybody.
All right. So other stories in the news here. We just got the Sunday opinion piece. We're going to go off on this a little bit in hour 2, but 2 redheaded strangers, Maureen Dowd, the New York Times columnist who had overdosed on edibles in Colorado, got to meet up with Willie Nelson on the tour bus, the Honeysuckle Rose. Willie, of course, is a longtime board member for the advisory board of NORML, and I was just wondering if you saw that and saw any of Willie's advice about using edibles.
Well, and in fact, it's been making the rounds. Both celeb stoner folks, Chris Goldstein, who used to host this show, has mentioned it. And I feel like, what a surprise, Willie's used cannabis long enough to know what to do in order to minimize negative consequences. But it's really a question of paying attention to dosage, knowing your dosage when you start, and understanding that a little dab will do you.
Yeah, keep it simple, folks, and especially this. We've got a new campaign in Colorado, the Consume Responsibly campaign, that tries to make the point of start low, go slow, which is the theme that they've got of it. Start low, go slow, and they're saying, start at 5 milligram doses and see where things go from there. But this has been something I've experienced with edibles. I remember a normal event, I think. Was it the 2011 conference, where a couple cookies in and they just found me slumped in a corner, pretty much useless to anybody. So it's something that even the professionals can have a problem with. Personally, I just don't do edibles in public anymore.
I got to admit, I think they're best for right before bed when you're planning on getting a good night's sleep, and that's about it.
All right. I want to remind folks that you can get a hold of Dr. Mitch Earlywine directly if you prefer to keep things private. You can get into the email at 420research@gmail.com, 420research@gmail.com. There is another story I wanted to see your comment on. KPRC Houston reported on a significant increase of homeless people arriving from Texas to Colorado. And the head of one of the homeless shelters saying one of the big reasons is the homeless people wanting to smoke pot. Now, I've seen the prices of weed in Colorado. I don't think that's a very likely explanation, but what could you say about that particular story?
The rationale was supposed to be, they tend to get busted for cannabis possession when they're homeless in one state, and they'd be less likely to have that happen in another state. I could imagine somebody might have thought that as they were, hitchhiking their way into Colorado, but I'm afraid as soon as they realized they were going to have to work for hours and hours just to bum enough money for a gram, they may have been sorely disappointed.
Yeah, and I can't see the motivation of someone without a place to sleep wanting to leave, fairly warm, temperate Texas and make their way to Colorado as we're approaching winter. It didn't make a lot of sense to me, for sure. Oh, my goodness.
It's sad that this is how it gets framed, and there has been an increase in population in Colorado across all socioeconomic levels. So I think if they had compared it to, say, super wealthy people who moved there, that might have been a little more informative as far as the statistics were concerned.
All right. Well, Dr. Mitch Earlywine joins us on every Monday at 5:30 to discuss the cannabis Q&A. And if you want to get your question asked, you can send it in by email, like we said, to 420research@gmail.com. As we're looking toward election season, Dr. Mitch, any thoughts on the ballot measures that are approaching in the 3 states and Washington, D.C.?
The key here is just going to be voter turnout. So everybody who's listening, make sure you take a friend to the polls with you, and then the two of you go grab another friend and make sure that person votes too. Because I know we can win if we can just get everybody out there, but it may mean driving our own bus.
All right, let's get it done. Get out the vote, everyone. Dr. Mitch, thanks for joining us here on another Cannabis Q&A.
Talk to you again.
All right, when we come back, time for a radical rant. Oregon NIMBYs love beer and wine. Not so much on the medical marijuana. Stick around.
You're tuned into the Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation.
420 Radio, your ticket to the Boston Freedom Rally. Adam Hand of Handmade Apparel produces quality custom designs for t-shirts, hats, and other apparel. Handmade Apparel is the official design shop for 420 Radio, among many clients who rely on Adam Hand for everything from short-run custom projects to full-run clothing lines. Visit handmadeapparel.biz to browse the selection of handmade gear or to get a personal quote for your own designs. Handmade Apparel, a proud supporter of 420radio.org. In the interest of fair and balanced journalism, the Russ Belville Show presents the anti-drug public service announcement of the day.
Hey,
Hey, little dude, send your mama and daddy out of the room. I gotta get you up on this. You know who I am. Snake, dealing in weed, coke, crack, your choice. Take one hit and you'll do anything to cop more. Steal from your mama, lie, cheat on your homeboys. But hey, that's the price you pay when you deal with dudes like me. Now, some folks will tell you that I'm dealing in poison. But hey, do I look like the kind of guy that would do that to a kid like you? Yes!
This has been the anti-drug public service announcement of the day. To cure this sort of reefer madness, listen to the Russ Belville Show every weekday on 420 Radio.
If you look at the projected tax revenues in Washington State and in Colorado and also nationally, Colorado 67 million, Washington 560 million, a hypothetical look more nationally, $5.8 billion. What do you make of that, Dan?
Well, you know, I think the taxation revenue is the icing on the cake. I mean, for most Americans, the reason that they want to tax and regulate marijuana, again, is to no longer arrest and prosecute adults for using something that's safer than alcohol. My background is as a prosecuting attorney, and I just felt like it was a waste of my time and my taxpayer dollars arresting people for something that's really just not a threat to public safety. So if we can, you know, take revenue away from drug cartels and reallocate law enforcement resources and do all of those things, that makes sense. And if we can maybe collect some tax revenue on top of that, then that's icing on.
You can't handle the truth.
Entirely legitimate topic for debate.
You have offended my family.
Hey, this is great, man.
And you have offended a Shaolin temple.
One major responsibility is to encourage people to use less drugs.
I know nothing.
I support a change in law to end federal criminal penalties for possession of up to 1 ounce of marijuana.
We don't need no stinking budget.
Homosexuality, immorality in general.
How in the century you have slurred the meaning of the words we, the people.
Be warned, this is not your mother's marijuana.
You could ask yourself a question. Do I feel lucky? Well, do you, punk?
I want to ask you a bunch of questions. I want to have them answered immediately.
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
Radical Rant.
Welcome back, everybody. 47 after the hour. And today I want to talk about some Oregon NIMBYs. You know NIMBY. NIMBY is an acronym they use in politics that means not in my backyard. Oh, sure. We need a new prison or a rehab or a halfway house, but build it far away from me. Now, NIMBYism happens all the time in various political arenas, and it's usually invoked in the name of the children. Please, God, won't somebody think of the children whose delicate sensibilities must be protected from the realities of life. Now, it's kind of funny here in Oregon. Of course, we're ramping up with Measure 91, our initiative to legalize marijuana that a lot of people think is in the bag. But folks, we got to get the vote out. Make sure you get registered and you vote. But a lot of people are already planning for it as if it's a done deal. The city of Portland's already putting together committees to discuss how they're going to regulate, how they're going to zone marijuana stores. And we've already got 4 or 5 Oregon cities trying to pass taxes on marijuana sales before marijuana sales are even legal, trying to shoehorn their way into being able to tax marijuana after 91 passes. They won't be able to. Measure 91 gives the state exclusive right to tax marijuana, but these cities think maybe if they can get a tax passed, it can get grandfathered in. You see, they're trying to pull a fast one here. But today I want to talk about this NIMBYism, not in my backyard, because in addition to legalizing marijuana under Measure 91, recently we legalized marijuana dispensaries under House Bill 3460. Now, 3460 was an extension of the work done by Anthony Johnson and other folks that were trying to pass Measure 74 all the way back in 2010. That was our measure to create a regulated medical marijuana dispensary system. See, Oregon passed medical marijuana back in 1998, but we passed it under what I call the weed fairy rule. It was perfectly legal to possess, to grow, and to trade with other patients your medical marijuana. But where is that medical marijuana supposed to come from? Either the original seed or seedling or the marijuana itself. Where is it supposed to come from? Yeah, that's it. No, they didn't say. The weed fairy. They would give you no guidance. There was no legal way to go buy and sell marijuana. You could get a grower to grow it for you, But where does that grower get the first seedling? No legal way. There was no legal way to start your marijuana supply in the state of Oregon. You had to rely on the weed fairy. It was a wink, wink, nudge, nudge of the government going, well, we know you'll get it somewhere. In a sense, it was the state government allowing and accepting black market marijuana into the medical marijuana system. So, through a lot of political work and compromising, even though the voters voted down Measure 74 back in 2010 by, I think, a 44% was all it got in support. Even though that happened, everybody knew that no matter what the vote was, people were going to continue buying and selling marijuana. So 3460 passed, and it regulated dispensaries. In fact, it regulated them to an extent that some of the existing dispensaries are getting shut down because they haven't gone through the licensure and the regulation that they're supposed to. So, in the context of that, us finally passing legal marijuana dispensaries and rules, we've got these NIMBYs that are popping up in the Northeast Portland neighborhood. This one's the, which neighborhood is this? I forget the exact name of the neighborhood, but anyway, it's kind of a tony little neighborhood, right? You gotta have some money to live there. And so on Sunday in the Oregonian, or maybe it was Saturday's Oregonian, they had a story about this. Now, you got to understand that these state-licensed medical marijuana dispensaries, every single one of them that I've been to is a clean, modern, secure storefront. And I've been visiting the ones on Sandy Boulevard and Division Street, which are these commercial avenues, kind of looked down on by Portlanders as kind of being seedy, low rent neighborhood kind of things, right? And even in those neighborhoods, even on these avenues that are supposedly in these lower rent areas, these dispensaries are clean and modern and beautiful architecture. And yeah, they might have a green cross at the entrance, but the entrance itself is a buzz-through door. You got to show your ID. You got to show your medical marijuana card before they'll let you in. They'll only let adults in. The windows, if they have windows, are opaque frosted glass, and there's no ostentatious display of pot leaves or 420 culture or bikini sign twirlers out front or anything like that, right? But that doesn't stop the NIMBYs from screaming bloody murder if you try to open up a dispensary in their neighborhood. The Oregonian story as the Fremont neighborhood is what they're talking about, and they spoke to a woman named Katie Fackler, who's a mother of two, and she said, quote, "Children are up and down, riding their scooters. My children personally go to the bookstore twice a week. We go to the candy shop. It's a children's neighborhood." End quote. They also spoke to Michaela Santon, who's a mom of three, who said, quote, "I just don't want it there. It does not fit there. We have a sweet, innocent neighborhood, and I want to keep it that way." End quote. Now, understand that the new dispensary law mandates that dispensaries are to be located at least 1,000 feet from a school and 1,000 feet from other dispensaries. And the proposed dispensary in the Fremont neighborhood meets those requirements. But Fackler complains that it's just 600 feet from a Sylvan Learning Center. Now, if you don't know what those are, it's a for-profit tutoring company that does not meet the requirements of a school. But as concerned as Fackler and Santon are about the medical marijuana dispensary that hasn't even opened up yet in their neighborhood, they seem to have no problem with the Alameda Brew House that is open right next door to the very dispensary location that they are so afraid of. That's right. Let me see if I can find the picture here. I actually looked it up on the Google Street View. And over here to the right, you can see a children's place by that red vehicle that's parked in the bottom right corner there. That's a children's place. That's the little bookstore that the Fackler family, the mom Fackler there, brings her two kids to twice a week. And on the left side of the screen, literally a door away, is the Alameda Brew House. And you can see, if you can see that kind of gray, brownish looking round thing below the word Alameda, that is a full size, well, not full size, it's a huge hops bud. It's a hops bud in brass or copper. I don't know what they made it out of. A hops bud sticking out of the building, and right out front on the sidewalk, patio dining, that the kids have to walk by where people are consuming a drug far more harmful than marijuana. And right next door to the brew house is Barrile, which is a craft wine and beer store. And on the day Google Street View took these pictures, there was a Rodney Strong Vineyards truck parked across the street making a delivery. As we continue down the block towards where the dispensary will be someday, there are 2 restaurants with sidewalk tables shaded by Widmer Hefeweizen beer umbrellas. 1 block past the dispensary is Mr. Pete's Pub. And finally, just as we reach the end of the 1,000-foot zone around the proposed dispensary, we find the Blackbird Wine Shop. Now, another NIMBY complained about Green Oasis, which opened up in the Sellwood neighborhood. As you may have guessed, within 1,000 feet of the Green Oasis, we can find more alcohol outlets than marijuana outlets, including the Sellwood Public House, the Leipzig Tavern, and the Portland Bottle Show Specialty Wine and Beer, as well as restaurants with beer-sponsored umbrellas shading the outdoor drinkers. Now, according to the Oregonian, Fackler has gone so far as to rearrange her living room furniture to avoid seeing the storefront from her window. Quote, "I don't know how it is going to serve that neighborhood specifically," said Santon without a hint of irony that sick people in her neighborhood need cannabis medicine, while her neighborhood is served by at least 6 outlets within a 1,000-foot radius selling alcohol. This, folks, is just bigotry, plain and simple. People like Fackler and Santon are just the latest Americans to freak out over the increasing visibility of those people. And today, it's medical marijuana patients and whatever stereotype that she attributes to the people that use cannabis. Yesterday, it was the Irish. Before that, it was the Mexicans. Before that, it was the blacks. Before that, it was the Native Americans. Before, it was the gays. It was the women. Bigotry is bigotry, plain and simple. There is nothing about the opening of a proposed medical marijuana facility that checks people's IDs, that checks to see that the state has issued them a card indicating that their condition has been verified by at least 1 doctor, oftentimes 2 doctors, in accordance with a state law passed by a majority of the population. There is nothing about these storefronts that is attracting homeless people sleeping on the sidewalks, that is attracting mass amounts of people smoking pot out front. It is simply a building where adults only can go into and get their marijuana without supporting crime, without supporting cartels, without supporting illegal growers. And this is the NIMBYism that these people have. And this Fackler went on so far to say is that she was considering voting for Measure 91 until this medical marijuana shop opened. And then, oh my God, now she realizes she's going to vote against it. Because God forbid the Fackler kids might have to be explained to what marijuana is while they walk by the Alameda Brew House and see a whole bunch of adults drinking alcohol. As they walk by the Barille wine store and see adults purchasing alcohol. And this is where the people on the other side are completely blind. They think this has to do with marijuana. They really think it has to do with whether or not this plant and the consumption of it is harmful to the users and to society. And that's only secondarily what we're talking about here. What we're talking about here is the unequal treatment of adults for their use of cannabis versus their use of alcohol or tobacco. We are being treated unequally, we are being treated unfairly, and we will not stop until we get the justice we deserve. We will not stop until we are treated equally. As it is, we are accepting proposals for the legalization of marijuana that restrict advertising speech, restrict public use, restrict the amounts we can purchase. We are so desperate for our freedom and equality, we're willing to accept Jim Crow second-class citizenship at this point. Hey, it'd be awfully nice to only be whipped 5 days a week instead of 7. Someday we will live to the point where we are treated no differently than beer drinkers and cigar smokers. But for right now, I will take not getting locked up in a cage and having my life ruined over it. That's all the time we got for Hour 1. More on the Alaska Reporter story coming up in Hour 2. Plus, interviews with Bobby Platshorn at the High Times Cannabis Cup.
This is the Russ Belville Show. The Russ Belville Show is blogging and podcasting daily at radicalruss.com.
For everyone here at 420 Radio, thanks for joining us. I'm Radical Russ, and until next time, take care of each other, tokers.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth.